Welcome to Locality's Making Bank podcast, where we continue our exploration of South Florida's entrepreneurial landscape with host Keith Costello, co-founder and CEO of Locality Bank. Sit back, relax, and let South Florida visionaries guide you on an entrepreneurial journey from tribulation to triumph, sharing the very stories that have shaped them.
Randy Goggans, welcome to Locality Bank's Making Bank podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Glad to be here.
And you're joining us from out of town, and also somebody with banking background, FinTech background. So you're just an ideal guest. We don't have a lot of bankers on or people from FinTech. So this is really really a pleasure to have you here today. And we're also, I have to say, a customer of BankerBounty, which is Randy's latest company, which we'll get into.
Thank you for that
in a minute. Absolutely, thank you for telling us about it. So where we usually start, Randy, is we like to talk about where you grew up, your family, and any early influences that led you to become the entrepreneurial person you are.
Sure. Well, again, thank you for having me.
Sure.
I'm looking forward to being here. It's coming from Birmingham. It was 50 and raining, and I got down here, so it's super nice down here.
Great. Enjoying
it. But yeah, my background, I grew up on a little farm in south of Birmingham, Alabama, and you always look at how I think it's interesting how backgrounds do affect your what you end up doing in life. And my dad was I would say he was a land trader. So he would buy big tracts of land, fix them up like he would put roads and lakes and cabins, and he would sell them off to individuals for recreational hunting places.
Okay.
The good and the bad of that. The good was I loved to be outdoors and hunt and all that, so I always had a place to do that. The bad was he would always sell them, so I never could I fall in love with them and he'd sell them. But really, yes, maybe what was caused me to get into entrepreneurship and interested in starting businesses, taking risks. It's probably because of the ups and downs I saw with real estate. My dad was always hustling, and there'd be times when times were great, and there'd be times when there was nothing.
Yeah.
So I kind of saw the ups and downs, and I was okay with that, but I wanted to. I wanted to figure out a market that I could take risks, and he was always out hustling, and I knew I'm fine with that, but I wanted a market that I could take risks, but not have that extreme up and down. But I like being responsible for the risks, that I take. I'm fine with it, but I like knowing that I'm responsible if it goes good or if it goes bad. So
wow.
But that's kind of a random upbringing, and I can keep going if you want me to on that.
Yeah, keep going.
So I did that, graduated, went to Auburn, the Ivy League school of Alabama, the best school in the state. Kidding on the Ivy League part, I learned a little bit. I learned a little bit, but I actually majored in entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And it was the first year that they offered an entrepreneurship major at Auburn, and it was so cool because it was kind of like what you're doing for your listeners of hearing these stories from entrepreneurs. That's all the entrepreneurship school at Auburn was. The first year was bringing in business owners, and they would come in and tell us their story about how they started a business and where they took it to, if they still had it, they sold it, and it was just super interesting to me. But again, the good and the bad of that was it wasn't always good. We had some guys come in there that were like, look, I thought I had a home run and I was blowing and going. And then, somebody came in competition and just halted it and they shut me down,
Yeah.
And so the good thing about that was, entrepreneurship, everybody kind of looks at it now as it's always going to be, great and wonderful. But there's a lot of risk to it. And I always say, like Steve Jobs, people are like, he was just a genius. Well, the few ideas that he had that worked great were great, but he had about 1,000 that he tried that didn't work.
Yeah.
Nobody ever talks about those.
Oh, or, after he got kicked out of Apple.
Right.
And fired basically by the board. And he was down and out. I
Right.
mean, you read about that time, and people forget all these things, right?
Right.
They forget that Steve Jobs wasn't invited even to, and this was something I just read that blew me away. at the time, whoever the president was, how the president just had all the tech bros at the inauguration.
Right.
Well, at that time that Steve Jobs was outed of Apple, they did like a presidential meeting of like the top technology leaders in America, and he wasn't invited.
Right.
Like and that was like the top 250, and I mean, Steve Jobs is not in that group.
Yeah.
Like, so that is amazing, and I think that is one thing that a lot of people don't realize is how hard it is, and how it's not just straight up.
No.
And I think so. What's interesting to me about what you said about how you saw your father in real estate, and he was taking like the boom,
right?
The real estate. I think if you wonder why there aren't more big banks in Florida, it's because of the real estate market.
Right.
It put a lot of banks came here, tried to grow,
right,
and were put out of business by the severity of the real estate cycle in Florida.
Right.
And I think, so you saw that, and so how did that influence what you chose to do, where you thought maybe I won't be able to minimize those kind of
Great question. And I'll keep going on that and get to that
Sure.
get to that
You
question.
go wherever you want.
So graduated,
yeah,
and I always that was kind of a passion I would say I had was growing up on a farm, always had land, hunting and fishing. I was like, I want to, and a little bit selfishly too, my now wife was in nursing school at Auburn, and she had another year. So I kind of wanted to just burn a year anyway and stay at Auburn because it was a great place to live. So I just sold farms and land for a year. And in doing that is how I actually got to be in the software business. I sold a farm to a totally random gentleman. Called me, back in the day when I was selling farms and land. That was the only thing I sold. So I was real estate. I didn't do anything else except farms. I kind of created a little niche there.
Okay.
But it was back when the only means of advertising was in the newspaper. So you'd put an ad in the newspaper and just, it's before social media,
Yeah.
And this guy called me out of the paper, and I sold him a farm, and he had never bought a farm before. And I remember he bought it, it's about 300 acres. And he looked at me and goes, "Now what do I do?" And I said, "Well, most people buy a tractor."
So, can I sell you one of those?
So he bought a tractor. Anyway, that relationship went for about a year, just buying and selling farms. And one night he called me and said, "How come you've never asked me what I do for a living?" And I didn't know really if if he was kind of calling me out or not. But I said, "I don't know. I mean, we've got a good relationship. We're good friends. You're doing good. I'm doing good." He goes, "Come down to the office." And so this was a guy that had built several companies in developing software for community banks. And he was the first, we're here in Florida. So there was a company here in Florida called Kirchman Corporation.
Yeah. Remember that?
He was the first outsourced data center for Kirchman Corporation in Birmingham.
Okay.
And so they were in-house, and he was the first outsourced data center. So he had sold that company to Metavante.
Okay.
And then 6 months later, Metavante sold to FIS. But I met him after he had sold it, and he said, "I'm starting a new company, and it's called Trinovus. This was 2008. So this was about when you were starting your bank, your last bank. And so he said, I develop and sell software to community banks. And I was thinking in my mind, wow, that's great. I know nothing about software, and I know nothing about community banks. So I remember going home to my wife, and I told her, I think I'm gonna take a job with this guy. and we don't come from any family money or anything.
Yeah.
So we're just she said, "How much is he gonna pay you?" And I said, "Oh yeah, it's commission only." So, but he encouraged me to try it because, it was a totally different sector than what I was used to. And, fast forwarding what I've learned, I never really thought I'd love that sector, but the part that I really liked, that I always tell people in business and in life is, working with guys like you, with these CEOs of these community banks that I ended up having a lot in common with, just in life, just general. And because I always kind of thought getting into this business, I'd be locked in like a server closet with a bunch of IT guys, and that wouldn't work for me. But I just really enjoyed working with these community banks because, they're real people. They're doing real benefits. I mean, they're really benefiting their communities. They have real relationships with their customers. And that was just so much fun for me. But But that was kind of my entree. So we started TriNovus, and we were selling a compliance service to banks, where instead of the service was called TriComply, and it's, instead for community banks with Dodd-Frank, we had, I think, 1,800 regulations. I think it was 1,800 regulations, but the community banks
still coming.
Yeah, the community banks couldn't go out and hire 50 compliance officers. So we put together a service. We actually hired the head of Kirchman and then FIS's compliance, a guy named Blair Rue, who actually lives in Orlando. He's 92 now, and I still talk to him.
Wow,
He's like a compliance book. He's great. But we put him as the head of this service. We put a team of compliance officers around him. And we gave our community banks the ability for a small monthly fee, instead of hiring more compliance officers, to just have their one compliance officer reach out to our team to comply with all these regulations. And
I do think we use you, because you mentioned that when you first came in, and
Right.
Compliance is not my forte or
Right.
anything that catches my attention very
Right.
long. But I think that was a great solution, and I believe we were customers of yours
Right.
back in those days. Yeah.
so you're not reading up on compliance on the weekends and late at night.
I'm glad there's Blair Ruse out
Yeah,
there that
yeah.
keep track of all that stuff.
But I look back on starting there, because really it didn't interest me in any way, but I saw how much it was benefiting our clients, by, just efficiencies of reaching out to the best of the best and just utilizing the resource you had at the bank to do that. And we only charged a couple $100 a month to do that. So it was a massive advantage. But what we built that company, I think we had 1,000 banks, and sold it to a company called Temenos.
Familiar with that?
Temenos is a Swiss core processor, and they're in 57 countries. And I figured out real quick, they put me in charge of sales for the U.S. with this product, and I figured out real quick that they were great guys. Great, I really liked they were all British guys, and it was funny when they would come down to Alabama. They'd say, "I want to meet some of your banks." I'm like, "All right, take off the little tie,
Yeah, right, right.
loose, just you got to relax a little bit." And this guy's going to probably talk about deer hunting for 20 minutes before so don't stop him. But it was a fun company to work with. I'm not a big company guy. Just like you said, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't fit well inside of a box. But so I left, and me and the same gentleman started another company called Threat Advice.
What's his name?
David Brassfield.
David Brassfield,
Yep.
and he was the guy that you started working with on TriNovus.
Right.
Awesome.
And he'd been around a long time and very successful, learned a lot.
So a mentor.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. And he really understood, he started with NCR. So he was an engineer, and the way he started became an entrepreneur, because he saw the sales guys making all the money, but he was doing all the work. So, he that's why he started his first company.
Yeah.
So
hire the sales guys.
Absolutely. Learned a ton from him. And so we started another company together called Threat Advice, after we sold to Temenos. And Threat Advice was a cybersecurity company. And this was when back before, the term ransomware, Bitcoin, all that, back then, that was 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Nobody was even talking about that at that time, but it was affecting our banks tremendously. We were getting calls from our bank CEOs saying, we're looking at our computer screens right now. It says you're held for ransom. What does that mean? And you need to pay 10 Bitcoins or whatever it was at the time. So we found out that all those attempts at getting in the systems were really due to lack of employee education, lack of employees knowing what to look for on emails, phone calls, whatever it may be. So Threat Advice was a learning management system that we would sell to community banks that would we just put together really short videos for the average employee, not the tech person, that would educate them on what to look for to de-risk cybersecurity for the bank. Okay. And it was really, that's the ticket to, I always say when banks call me, what do I need to do? You need to educate your employees, and you need to have 2-factor authentication on everything you do. So everything, that is the best defense, is 2-factor authentication. So after that, we sold that company we sold that company to another larger firm. And so that gets to where we are today with BankerBounty.
So that was 2023. You sold Trade Advice?
2022.
2022.
Right,
okay.
Right. And so there are always banks. I love when we start out, we do demos with banks all the time. I go meet banks and I always like to tell them, like, why did we start BankerBounty? What's the problem that we're solving? And really the problem that we solve is a problem that I identified, and I'll tell you how I identified it over time. It wasn't like just one day I woke up and was like, hey, I think this would work. Backtracking, when I started working, in this business, we were developing new technology. So they would give me I was always the first sales guy. So they'd hand me the technology and say, go sell it. So I was always the guy that would commercialize it initially out to the banks. And what I figured a niche would give me was I didn't want to just be a sales guy. Like I would sell to you, the CEO, but I didn't want you just to think I was just a sales guy. I wanted to become a consultant to the bank. And in order to do that, I had to prove to you that I knew what the heck I was talking about. So I figured I'm not only going to sell the product, I'm going to install it for the bank, because that would give me credibility with the CEO, but it'd give me a lot of credibility with the back office staff that are not salespeople. And so over the years, literally over 10 years or whatever, I would always do that. And I formed these the back office staff at most banks are there for a long time, and so they know the bank, they live in the community, they know what the bank's looking for. But one thing that the bank never did, banks would always say, hey, we got this asset liability management, we need more deposits this month. How can you help us with that? And nobody really had a solution. But I always thought, why not use your people that you have? They all have not just existing relationships, but they live in your community. They're out at kids' baseball games, parties, concerts, beach. They're running into opportunities. And the reason why they don't send them in is because you hadn't given them a non-salesperson the right tool to be able to do that. And so what really started happening was I would go install the product, and in just conversation just like we're having today, I would just be installing, say, a compliance product, and I would ask the compliance officer, how long you been at the bank? 15 years. Are you married? Yeah, I'm married. What does your husband do? Oh, he owns a big company down the road. And then every logical salesperson, the next question would be, does he bank at this bank? And I can't tell you, over the years, the overwhelming majority would be like, no, he doesn't bank at this bank. And I would just be staring at him like, why not? And they would just say the same thing over and over again. Well, there's no incentive. There's no incentive for me to go home and tell him he should bank here. Or they would say, we've tried something in the past as an incentive and I sent it in, it didn't work, or I sent it in, never got paid, and I only did it one time because it's not worth it, because over the years, I always knew there had to be the right tool to basically, like, I'm an Auburn guy, but I'll give a Nick Sabin example, because I feel like the majority of the banks we sell to are Alabama fans, and probably Alabama starts going downhill, they're going to be Auburn fans again. But,
that's right.
But I like a Nick Sabin example. Like, if Nick Sabin had so he's a great coach, right? I think we all agree he's a decent coach. We'll give him that. But even if he had the best quarterback, which he always did, if he had the best running back, which he always did, if he had the best receiver, which he always did, would he only play? How many times you see him play 3 players to win the game? Never. Right. So he would always play 11 players to win the game, which is, I would equate that exactly what we're trying to get our banks that are using BankerBounty to do. Is every bank needs loans, every bank needs deposits, everybody needs new customers. But what are you doing to do that, to get those, And I always would look at every bank I would leave and be like, you're only utilizing like 20% of your bank to go get what you need. Why not use your whole team to help grow the bank, to grow whatever it is you want to grow, mortgages, loans, treasury management, whatever. So, and I'll say one thing, when I would install these products and leave, I would always stop by the CEO's office after that example of my husband owns a big company, and I would literally hand him, I'd be like, Keith, here's a note card with 20 opportunities on it for the bank. And he would look at me dumbfounded, like, where'd you get those? And I'd say, from your own people in the back. and just talking to them, they all gave me these opportunities. So BankerBounty today, and we hadn't even gotten there yet, but BankerBounty today is not just, it's not just capitalizing on existing relationships that people might have. The key to BankerBounty and the reason why it's an app on their phone is because you're able to capitalize on opportunities in real time. If you're at the grocery store in the line, and one of our bank CEOs used this example of a win for him was he was sitting at the grocery store and somebody in front of him there, he called it the big bank debit card, wouldn't work. And they were like, let me try to call them. Well, of course, you're not getting him out of the phone. So he said, hey, I'm the president of, First Bank of Alabama. Let me get you, we'll take care of you. Come see us tomorrow. This will never happen again. So he went to his app and he sent in that right then let me capture capture your name, capture, this person's interested. Here's what happened. So that immediately got sent to the correct producer at that bank. They got it instantly in real time, accepted it, and that the person that sent the lead doesn't have to do anything else except monitor it and then get paid for it if you open the account. So,
and just one other thing I want to throw in there. So now you actually can you sync with HubSpot. Also, you were mentioning, which
that's right.
A lot of smaller organizations like us use HubSpot for CRM.
Yep.
So that's really
well, that's a good point. I'm glad you
brought
brought that up because a lot of banks get confused on, they will try to utilize a CRM for their back office and it doesn't work because HubSpot, Salesforce, these CRM systems, they were built for salespeople.
Right.
So they're meant for salespeople. They were not built for tellers and deposit ops and loan ops. They were not built for non-salespeople. So trying to get them to use, we've had so many banks that a lot of the big core vendors today, FIS, Jack Henry, Fiserv, will include a CRM in their package if you use core processing. And they'll say, well, heck, let me at least try it. So they'll spend a year or two trying it and it just doesn't work. In seeing that was another thing that encouraged me to build the right product to be able to capitalize on these opportunities in real time. So,
but the thing is, from my perspective, HubSpot's great because I can track it.
Sure.
So I get your point. It's not going to work for a lot of people in the bank. And you're right. It's a sales tool.
Right.
But from a management standpoint, that way we can follow up, make sure that's happening, see how well it's working. So that's why we really like that ability to sync with our CRM.
Oh yeah, that's going to be great. That's going to be great. Then that's one thing I look at when you look at software in general. That why do you use software? It's to take a bunch of manual processes and simplify them, make them more efficient. Right. So that's really what we've done. When banks, CEOs call me and say, "Tell me in 1 minute what y'all do." I get that a lot. Like my people are telling me we need to buy this BankerBounty product. Tell me in 1 minute what we do. And I say, we streamline all the leads you're getting, and we streamline we give you one place to be able to manage all these leads in one place without having to go track down text messages, emails, so we'll get to that, I guess, in a minute when we talk about BankerBounty. But so
dig right in.
Dig right in. Okay.
Yeah, go right into BankerBounty.
So we've kind of hit on some of the things we do, but I'll just, we have BankerBounty today is, over all those years of seeing that banks are operating to win with 20% of their staff, and over the years I was like, it's got to be the right tool has got to be in the purse or the pocket of the employee to capture those. Because like, if you've just got a tool here at the bank and you're out at a football game on Friday night and because this happened to me while we were building BankerBounty, I was like, looking for give me some real, I want to see some real. So I ran into a lady at a football game on Friday night. And this gets to the reason why it has to be an app is she was a deposit ops lady at a bank in Birmingham. And I knew her, but she said, she goes, "Wow, will you open up an account with us?" I just started BankerBounty. I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to." And she said, "I'll have somebody reach out to you Monday morning." I said, "Perfect." So that was a year ago. And to this day, do you think anybody has reached out to me? So it's not because she didn't want my business. It's because that she forgot.
Or she texted somebody or she did something and it got,
Right. It just got lost. Or, she's not think about how many things occur between Friday night, if you got kids, especially Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and then Monday morning, you got 50 emails, you got meetings, you just forgot. So how many leads get forgotten about that you capitalize on? So So what we've got today with BankerBounty is it's not just an app; it's a program. We start out by giving most of our banks we don't have any competition doing what we're doing today. And when banks say, "Oh, come on, who's your competition?" I say, "Okay, Excel spreadsheet is our competition," because we have built the problem we're solving is we are giving how many employees does y'all's bank have?
44.
So 44. So probably half or more are back office. Easily. So they're going to, the program is and the problem, I'm sorry, we solve is that we're giving them a tool. Everybody in the bank's going to have this tool on their phone. We've got 2 user types. We've got lead generators, and lead generators can only send leads to producers. And then we've got producers, and the only difference in the 2 user types on the app is a producer can receive these leads. Like if they're a deposit producer, they'll receive deposit leads. If they're a lender, they'll receive loan referrals. If they do both, they can receive both. But the cool thing about it is it's not just like the producers, the difference in their roles, they can actually send leads as well. So if I work for a locality bank here and I'm a deposit producer and I go bring in deposits, but yet one of those guys calls me and says, "Hey, I'm buying when I pulled up, I saw this yacht brokerage back behind your bank here." And this guy's a good depositor. He says, "Hey, I'm buying a yacht and I need to get a loan." Well, I don't do loans because I'm just a deposit guy. So I would then I would refer that to a lender at this bank to take care of that customer to do a loan. So I say that because 100% of your employees are going to use BankerBounty, not just your back office. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. It gets everybody.
Excellent.
And we actually, so that's the problem we solve is giving the back office employees a tool that allows them to very simply, easily send opportunities to your frontline salespeople. And that's it seems we always say in our demos and presentations, like, I think you were the quickest demo ever. I still tell banks that. I'm like, they say, how much time do we need? And I said, well, one guy in Florida needed 14 minutes.
Well, they say a good salesman's always the easiest sale.
But it really is. You got it real quickly. How it's so simple. It just is if we would have introduced BankerBounty, I would even say 5 years ago. The technology on these phones, the apps, if 5 years ago, my parents didn't even know how to download an app. But I don't know what's happened in 5 years. Just more usage of a smartphone is now my grandmother is sending me, apps I need. So it's not, if we would have introduced this 5 years ago, maybe the whole bank wouldn't adopt this because they didn't really understand how to download an app on their phone or how it worked. But everybody does now. Everybody knows how to. So we are when I say we're a program, we first give the bank a policy. So an employee referral policy. Mm-hmm. And compliance is, me coming from compliance, that's a big part of anything you're doing, at a bank today. So we're a non-critical vendor. We don't connect with any of your systems at the bank. Like you mentioned, we don't connect with the core system. Right. The deal with HubSpot, we're just exporting our data to HubSpot. So we're not integrating with any of the bank's data. And they love that because you can plug and play. We're non-critical, but yet we have SOC 1, SOC 2, because we are capturing, the customer. Right. They become a customer, but the prospect data that resides on the app is not required. It's just public data. Right. But we do secure number, and none of the customer data resides on the app. It only resides on on the management dashboard. So we've got the policy, we have the app in both the Google Play Store, which is Android users, and I've been shocked how many. I don't know if y'all use Androids. I don't think y'all do. Yeah. Something about our community banks in rural areas, there are so many Androids. I think they work better in community. Interesting. I don't know why that is. I hadn't investigated, but so we're in Android and iOS for Apple iPhones. Then we've actually also built, and I kind of did this just from knowing bank because I knew you'd have the no offense against saying the little old lady back there that's like, I'm not downloading an app on my phone. And so we built a website that mimics the app that they can go to their PC. And we kind of did that just to prepare for an employee that said it. But really what banks have done with that is a lot of banks, like when somebody walks in one of your branches, they don't want to see your employees on your phone. Yeah. So in their policy, they'll say, look, if you're going to submit a lead during bank hours, just submit it on the PC on the
Sure.
on the website we built for you. So that's the second piece, and then the final piece is we give you, the CEO, the president, the manager, we give you a dashboard similar to HubSpot.
Yeah.
To
track it.
You track everything in real time. So, and you control your app. So let's say we mentioned, we help our banks set up what products, you put out there and what you want to pay on those products. And now we can tell you as your asset size bank, here are our most successful programs, and here's what they're putting out there, and here's what they're paying on them. And the ROI, quick, again, sales guy, I'm just going to, some of the data, we've got a lot of data now over the course of the past year. We got banks in 15 states now. So we've got data from a $100 million bank all the way up to a $6 billion bank right now.
Yeah.
And the data is like the average ROI is 400%. So bankers, I always, when I say that, I'm like, hey, I'm not a banker, but I think that's good, and because they're always worried. They're like, well, what's the ROI going to be? Because they're worried they're going to pay out so much in incentives and not get that. But 400% is pretty good.
That's awesome.
I think it, but what we try to what we try to really look at with the program is not just how many new accounts you've brought in, but what engagement are you getting from your employees? Because if you got 2 employees out of 100 that are doing everything, that's not the intent of the program, is to get everybody contributing.
Sure.
So that's what we look at, and we encourage our CEOs to look at.
So what I want to do now is dig into a little bit. Tell us about, and less about BankerBounty, which is amazing, and we're customers. We're just getting signed up on it.
Right.
But more about your entrepreneurial challenges, launching BankerBounty, because this is a new. I mean, I was just started it like a year ago, right?
Right, 2 years ago.
So,
2 years.
so you made some money probably from these other, basically startups and things that you did. What are the challenges that you encountered in kind of taking this idea? And is David Brassfield involved in this one too? So this is just Randy.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
What challenges have you faced?
A good question. I'm glad you're asking these questions, because when you're building something brand new, like if I was building a product to compete with HubSpot, for instance, a CRM, well, you kind of know the market, right? But when you're building something brand new, there's a lot of challenges, but the thing that gave me a lot of assurities that this would work was my experience working with these community banks, and the need is there. And I learned a lot over the years. A lot of challenges that companies face when they're selling to banks is they don't present it right. They don't get to the point.
You knew the customer.
I knew the customer, right? I knew the customer, and
I could tell that when I talked to you.
Yeah.
When I spoke with you the first time, I felt like you understood me,
right,
and you understood what I was going through. So, I think that's a real lesson for anybody who is launching a business, and so we're a startup too, or 3 years old. But that's what we endeavor to do with every time we interact with somebody, right? We want them as a local business to feel like, hey, we're a local business too. We understand the problems you're going through. We understand it. And I felt that way with you. So that really came across.
Thank you. I appreciate
Have you been funding all this yourself, or you got partners?
Yeah,
no, all Randy.
Yeah, just
self-funded. Good for you, man.
And it's good because it's good because it really allows you, when you're starting these businesses, you have to pivot so much, to get it going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I would say, as I've gotten a little age on me in the past, I would try to do too many things.
Okay, another good lesson for everybody.
I would try to do too many things instead of really. And I also think that I've always been one of these guys, and even more so as I'm like a sponge. Like I'll never be classified as a know-it-all, because I bring in. I love listening to what other people say. I love reading, and again, I'll get to your point, but that's why I like the technology business. Is when I started in it, unlike other sectors that, like, take banking, for instance, healthcare, construction, legal. If you're not in that business for 20, 25 years, nobody's going to say, hey, he's an expert. Right. And the reason is that because, a lot of those sectors, they don't change a lot, but technology changes every second of every single day. So I always tell we bring in students, and I always, from these universities that are really sharp guys. And I'm like, I know you're smart. I know you got a 4.8 GPA. I know you made a 36, but just listen while you're here. and you might learn something. I can't guarantee it, but I've listened a lot, and I continue to listen, and I still don't know, what I should know. So, but that's the thing I like about the technology business. If you listen, you read, you stay up, you don't have to be in it for 25 years to know what the heck you're talking about. Take AI right now. I get calls all the time. They're like, "What's your take on AI?" And I tell them, I can give you my opinion of what I think about AI, but if somebody tells you today, I'll tell you exactly what AI is, what it's going to do, where it's going. They're just lying to you.
Yeah. Well, it's like the guys who say, what the S&P 500 is going to be in a year, right?
Right.
Nobody knows that, right? It's nonsense. So let's go to a couple questions. Let's jump into the lightning round.
Yeah.
Any last things you want to share in terms of a lesson for people who you've been, from me looking at you,
right?
I'm saying, this guy's like, he's solid gold. He's Teflon. He's glided through life with all these startups. And so tell people, that's the way it looks from the outside.
I'll tell you this, that's an awesome question. I tell folks that are, a lot of people want to give you ideas. A lot of people have ideas, but my advice when somebody comes to me, all ideas are not great ideas. And, but if someone comes to my office and is passionate about an idea that they have, and is really willing, one thing I do ask them as it relates to entrepreneurship, I was like, how long can you go without a paycheck? And if they
That's a great question.
If they say, maybe a couple of weeks, I'm like, you don't need to do a startup right now. No, I don't,
Yeah.
but what my advice to them to answer your question is really 2 words is get started. Get started on it. I mean, you can sit here and think about it and worry about it, but if you're passionate about an idea and you feel like it's going to work, to me, it's if you have those things and if you feel like it's going to work for a sector, just your energy behind that is going to get you clients. If you feel like it's going to work. So my advice would be get started. If you have an idea, quit. I ran into a guy the other day that he said, "Can I come over and talk to you? I've been brainstorming on this idea for a year." I said, "For a year? A year?" He said, "Yeah, I've been clustering and on my whiteboards, and I bring in people to tell me, and they shoot darts at it." I said, "Well, do you believe it can work?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I think it can work." Well, get started. And he's like, "Okay, I didn't
put the whiteboard down.
Put the whiteboard down. Put the other
do it."
Because most people when it comes to entrepreneurship are not entrepreneurs.
They're scared.
They're scared. They're going to give you well, what if you don't make money, or what if it fails? Well,
try again. Get up.
Try again. Try something else. So.
One of the things that struck me about when you're talking about when you were selling land,
right,
is the concept of hoolock, which is like the people that you meet. Okay. So if there was something you did when you sold that land to David Brassfield,
right,
that he said, "You know what? I want to partner up with this guy." So I would say there's a lesson there. No matter what you're doing, you may be, sweeping floors, you may be serving food in a McDonald's, but whatever you're doing, do it in a way that you're special and that people are going to recognize that this person is different. You just talked about staying at the breakers, and the service level at the breakers, that distinguishes people too, the way you treat other people. And so this hoolock, the person you met, David Brassfield, who said, "Hey, this guy, I want to partner up with this guy." David Brassfield could have partnered up with any other land salesman in America.
Right.
Right. You didn't even know anything about technology.
Right.
And he's like, "I want to bring this guy in." And you went and you said, with no paycheck, you had faith in yourself. So that in itself, I think, is a really valuable lesson. So,
and I think that's great. I got to add one point to that is to the folks that want to be entrepreneurs or are interested in that. Again, everybody's not an entrepreneur, but if you're interested in that, what I always figured with a David was, I have all these influences coming in, what are you doing? This is crazy. And I was like, if somebody's, in any business, if somebody's built and exited 3 or 4 companies in a competitive business, you might want to just sit back and listen and learn, because and that's really what I did. And to his credit, he was, when you get to that level, it's not about money. It's about you enjoy it, and it's time. It's if somebody's going to give me their time that's at that level, that's way more valuable than money. So that's what he did for me early on. He spent a lot of time with me to educate me on the business, and I just listened, and was able to, learn the business kind of. And he would throw me into situations. I remember like my second week, he goes, "We're speaking at the Tennessee Bankers Association. I can't go. Run up there and do it." And I was like, "All right." That's a whole nother thing about startups. I'm just put yourself in situations that are not comfortable. Or you're a military guy, so you can say that. I mean, what most things I've learned in life have been situations where I'm like, I'll never be able to do that. Well, just go figure it out.
Or if you're a leader, throw people into those situations like he did with you, right? And you find out. And people, one thing I found is if you have faith in your people, if you really believe in people, they're not going to disappoint you.
Right.
They will do everything they can. If they feel like you really believe in them, they'll do everything they can to make you happy and proud of them.
Totally agree.
So, all right, now this is great. I mean, I could go. We could go all day. But we got to go to the lightning round now. So I got to
get back to the pool.
Yeah. Yeah, we promised you'd be back at the Breakers, man. I want to go with you. I'm heading up to the Breakers too. We could have done this at the poolside, Ryan. What the hell's wrong with us, man?
We'll do that next time.
Okay. So I'll just throw these are quick 30-second or less answers.
Okay.
And whatever comes to mind. Okay. Your favorite book?
My favorite book, I will say, is one I just finished reading, and it's called Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday. And for those that have not read that's just one of his books. I'm a big believer. You said 30 seconds, so I'm going to keep it 30 seconds.
Okay.
This book is all about, not just entrepreneurs, but just life in general. We got phones, we got all this information coming at us. I think, he's a stoic.
Right.
Ryan Holiday's a stoic. And, I'm not like an expert on stoicism, but I do believe that if you're in life, you got to find, if you want to really think and, really, I'm a big believer, you got to create that for yourself, and a lot of people look at that as selfishness. You got to get away. You got to go walk in the woods. You got to do something for yourself to get away where you can get outside of just the day-to-day and get, so that book is all about how you kind of, stillness it's all about kind of getting out of your buzz over here and getting an environment where you can really focus and think about where you are in life, what you want to do. And so that's my favorite book, right?
I love Ryan Holiday. I've read a bunch of his books, and also, the Daily Stoic is a daily read of mine. I send it to my kids every day.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a song from your youth that's kind of like your theme song? I think this is going to be a good one.
Probably Joe Diffie, John Deere Green. No, I don't know. I grew up on that 80s and 90s country music. So, those old school guys, Joe Diffie, Brooks and Dunn, I love that.
Okay.
And I love these. I'll tell you something else I like is these, this songwriter. I don't know if y'all heard anything about these guys in Nashville that are writing songs. We recently went to a songwriters conference. I mean, a concert of these guys that are writing songs for all these, country guys. They are nothing knocking the performers, but that's a better concert than any country concert I've ever been to. But if I had to identify one song, I'm big on country, but
that's good.
I like some Huey Lewis too.
Okay. That's good. What's the best piece of advice you ever received?
Best piece of advice was, I want to be serious here, but I'm a golfer too. So it was actually, I'm kind of, I can take this as I heard it on the golf course. And this has nothing to do with being a know-it-all. It was just, I remember a guy telling me one time, I grew up playing golf, and, no Tiger Woods, but I can get it. But I was playing bad one day, and this guy that I was playing with just he was like, "We need to get your shoulder up. You need to get your grip." And I call him one of my L4 friends, level 4 friends, which is like the best friend. Yeah, everybody's got levels of friendships. He came over to me and answered your question. He goes, "Don't ever take advice from somebody you can beat."
That's a good one.
And I was like, "Okay, that's good. I'll go with that."
I like it.
I've got a lot of, I've had really good advice. I've got, a lot of good mentors in my life to give me good advice. So I can sit here for an hour and go through that. But that's one that just comes to the top.
So you already exceeded 30 seconds. So we're going to go to the next. Yeah. We're going to go to the next one. Who would you have dinner with? Anyone living or dead, if you could?
Wow.
In history.
You can tell this isn't a scripted interview, or I would have just thrown out an answer.
Right, yeah.
Probably, one of those, guys, I watched that show, The Men Who Built America. Have y'all ever seen that?
No.
The Men Who Built America is like Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, these guys that there was no regulations then. So you can kind of do whatever, but
I think we're going back there.
Yeah, we might be going back there, but it would be probably like I think it would be interesting to sit down with you talk about an entrepreneur, sit down with like a John D. Rockefeller.
Or Henry Flagler,
yeah,
the hotel you're staying in right now.
Yeah.
They were partners, actually.
I heard that. I read that last night.
Flagler.
But those guys, you talk about, like the Henry Flagler guy, I'm going to build a road or a train down from, can you imagine what that looked like?
All the way to Key West.
All the way to Key West. So,
and then he built a hotel down there, too.
Yeah. But you and they had all the money in the world, but still, they set out to do something. They didn't have to do that. So
I'm going to watch that. Where do you know what that's on? Is that on Netflix,
it's on History Channel. It's called The Men Who Built America.
I would love to see that.
Yeah.
That's
so
great.
Since we're at Palm Beach, I would say right now, Henry Flagler might be a good one.
Okay.
Maybe him and Rockefeller.
There you go.
You
can take two. That's all right. What's a travel destination that's on your bucket list that you haven't gotten to yet? I know you like going to Abaco.
We like the Bahamas, but my daughter said the other day, and I'm all for this, and she said, "Where are we going for spring break?" And I said, "I don't know. We hadn't figured that out yet. Where do you want to go?" And she said, "I want to go to the Maldives."
Oh.
I said, "Okay." I said, "Do you understand what it takes to get there?"
Did you ask her if she's buying?
Yeah. I said, "You got to fly to LA, then you got to go LA to, I think, Hawaii, or maybe you go to Hawaii, and then you got to take 10 hours to somewhere down there." So, but I asked her, I said, "Is that one place you really want to go before you go to college?" And she said, "Absolutely." So we're going to figure that out.
Awesome.
The Maldives.
All right. Well, if your daughter's listening, hold him to that. Don't let him change his mind now. He's on tape saying
I might kind of puddle jump though. I may kind of stop like in out west and hang out at somewhere out there for a little while, but the Maldives.
Great. So what now? So I'm going to go with Birmingham.
Okay.
Because you're obviously not a local guy, but if anybody's up in Birmingham, what's your favorite restaurant up there?
Oh, no question. My favorite restaurant is a little Italian place it's a little neighborhood Italian place called Gian Marco's.
Gian Marco's. Okay. Well,
no question. Birmingham's got tons of good restaurants.
I know it's got a good food scene. I've been up there. There's a lot
Bottega,
of really cool places.
You've got Highlands. These are all, but mine is, I'm kind of probably going back to that. Not a big company guy.
Yeah.
I don't like big restaurants. I don't like, because I can barely hear from shooting guns. I can't, we can't, it's a little frustrating when you get in a big restaurant. I can't hear anybody.
Exactly.
When people are trying to talk to me, I'm just kind of going off. But Gian Marco's I'll give them so many shout outs. It's one of those little neighborhood Italian places that could be huge, but they've stayed small.
Yeah.
And just,
I'm gonna run that by my buddy Charles White, who's up there with Stern Agee.
Yeah.
And ask him to take
Gian Marcos. That's where you need to go. Don't let him take you to one of those swanky downtown places.
No, or Chick-fil-A or
Chick-fil-A.
something like that. So this has been great. And you've got a great idea here in Banker's Bounty. Obviously, it took me 14 minutes to make that decision.
If any bankers are out there listening to this, 14 minutes. That'd be great.
See if you can beat that record.
If you can beat that. If you can beat that, we'll give you a discount. How about that?
So how can people get in touch with you, Randy?
Yeah, you can, bankerbounty.com is our website. Yeah. And
you're on LinkedIn, I know.
I'm on LinkedIn, bankerbounty.com. Email is just my initials, rg@bankerbounty.com.
Okay.
But I would say website is the best. I always try to tell banks, they're like, can you send me some information on your company? I always say, just go to the website. I mean,
nobody does those marketing. Like we talk about that too all the time. Yeah. Right. People want to do marketing, but I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Nobody does that now.
Nobody wants to do that. I mean, if somebody sends me a PowerPoint
that
deck,
stuff.
I'm not watching.
Well, I even throw, like if I get marketing materials, Brian knows I throw them right in the garbage.
Yeah.
I don't, I don't need more paper on my desk.
I think a website is intended to, like, people ask me all the time, like, you got a lot of testimonials on your website. Do you pay those banks to give that? I'm like, no, I don't pay them.
Right.
But I don't know any banks that take compensation for a testimonial on a website.
You can pay me.
You will. I'll pay you. But I would say, go to the website. We've got testimony. We've got video. I actually do a little, besides just being a FinTech guy.
Yeah.
I would say I have become, I bank with a community bank, and he's one of my best friends.
Yeah.
He's
Otherwise, we try and get you here.
Yeah. Well, that might happen. That might move down here. If I get a yacht one day, I'm coming to you. But
live at the Breakers, have a yacht.
That wouldn't be bad, would it?
Awesome.
That wouldn't be bad. That may be out of my league for a redneck from Alabama.
I don't know. You're going places.
We do a little series on our website. We call it "Keep It Local," and it's not. It's not intended to be. You guys are super professional here. This is intended to we get bank CEOs on there. Actually, I might have you on there, but it's not a pitch for Banker Bounty. It's just I'm just an advocate for community banks, because so many people that I surround myself with, friends, family, they constantly ask me these questions where they think they're good questions, but I'm sitting there, I want to say that's a dumb question. Somebody that asked me, like, well, I would bank with a community bank, but I have, I got $2 million. They couldn't handle me. I'm like, that is not true. That's 100% false. And if you want to, she goes, well, my big bank I'm with, they guarantee, I'm like, okay, here's the deal. If you're worried about a community bank holding $2 million, they have a program called Cedars that you can use, that they'll put your money in they'll take $250 and they'll take it out for you, where all your money can, where you have one relationship. So, but I get asked, so that's the point of, I did this video series, and I didn't just do it with banks, because with bank CEOs, I did it with, like, I have an NFL quarterback, Greg McElroy. He's an ESPN guy now. So
Ronnie Brown from Auburn.
Yeah.
Used to be on the board of my first bank.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, we need to get him on there. But I wanted to have guys. I've got another guy. There was a big syndicated radio show called Rick and Bubba Show. I don't know if y'all had that down here.
No.
Huge syndicate. I mean, they're in all over. But one of the Bubba is one of my good friends.
Okay.
I actually sold him a farm a long time ago. That's how we became friends. There we go. But he's on there too, and I've gotten him with the community bank that I bank with. Okay. And it's interesting. His reason, you and I were talking before we started the podcast, and you had started a bank right before PPP.
Yeah.
I believe it, right during PPP.
This one. Yeah.
Yeah. This bank here.
Yes. Yeah.
So Bubba is on we have videos. These are all on our website. He said, the reason why I went to, you told me to go talk to them, but I didn't think they could.
You said the name, they're not a competitor.
Well, no, I told him he was trying to get a PPP loan for his business. And he said, I have it with, one of the big banks, Bank of America or something like that. And he said, they won't call me back. And we need, we got some personal money, but we need this to keep our business going.
Right.
And he didn't hear anything back from the big I'm going to give him a shout out.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mitt Schroeder, Central State Bank. He's the CEO, his family owns a bank. And he reached out to Bubba, and in, I think, 30 minutes.
I love hearing these stories.
30 minutes. And now he's got all his, he got him the PPP loan for that show. And then I think all the guys from the show now bank with this bank simply because now they've heard the level of service, but they saw it. And they were like, boom, I need
to experience it.
Because we all know in life, we have ups and downs, and the good comes, the bad comes. And I came into this business, when that recession, the first recession, and I saw friends of mine that lost their job and had a mortgage with a big bank, and they just got a letter if they missed a payment for a month. They got a letter saying an eviction notice. Whereas I would say, my buddies that had a loan with a mortgage with a community bank, I would say just call the CEO, tell him what's happened, tell him you've lost your job, you're getting another job. And
we got to cut that part out. And that's a little segment for LinkedIn right there.
Yeah, there we go.
No, that's perfect.
But you see what I mean? I mean, that's just community banking.
I love that. And that is why exactly, Randy, that, I told you I was getting calls when I was on a non-compete. And that's why we started this bank. It's like, because I was on a non-compete, and people are saying, oh, we can't get money. We can't get calls. We can't even get a call back. Right. So we're like, okay, we'll start another bank. And so we did. And, it's not always, there's one thing I like to tell people too is people don't necessarily value a bank relationship until they have a problem.
Right.
When everything's going fine, and it's true kind of in life too, right?
Oh, yeah.
And we take a lot of our relationships for granted until you really need somebody, until you need that person to help you out. And you find out if they're a friend or not, right?
Right.
You go, and we've all done that. We've all gone to a friend or a relative when you really are in need, and you find out what that relationship's all about. Same thing in banking. And a bank relationship is so critical in business. And that's what I believe in.
Right.
That's why we're here, because we believe in those businesses. And if there's a way to help them, we're going to.
Right.
And sometimes you can't save a drowning victim, right? You will try.
Right.
You'll do everything you can, and we will.
Right.
And we have always tried to help companies as much as we can.
Well, that's part of why I do that series, that Keep It Local series, is just to promote community banking.
I'll tell you what.
I
mean, I don't think you extended an invite to me.
You're invited.
Okay.
We're
going to
go
to Gianmarco's.
We'll go to Gianmarco's.
Okay, I'll buy at Gianmarco's.
Great. I like that. I'll get a reservation on the books.
All right. Or maybe we'll invite Charles White. He'll buy.
Yeah. Well, those bond guys, they make way too much money anyway.
They got lots of expense account money. So, we could talk for all day. Thank you so much for being here. Flying down. I know it was so awful to have to come here to South Florida.
Yeah.
Drag yourself out of that rainy, drizzly weather and come to the breakers. But we really, you took a bullet for us. Thank you. Yeah. And great talking to you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Locality's Making Bank podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to catch the latest episodes, and visit localitybank.com today to learn more about all the benefits of banking local.